Uh, Ms. Schopp, may we please have roll call?
Yes. Excuse me, Brian Anderson,
Here.
Megan Miller,
Present?
Sean Levy.
Present.
All members are present.
Thank you so much. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Anderson, second by Levy to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. All right, motion passes unanimously. The next item, 1D, is the approval of the minutes from the November 28th meeting. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move that motion. Second.
Okay, we have Brian Anderson has moved approval of the meeting minutes from November 28th, and that has been seconded by President Levy. Any discussion? Hearing none. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. That takes us to our presentation for this evening, which is the Neola policy presentation. Dr. Garrison, would you like to take over?
Oh, sure. And so, thank you, board member Miller. Last week, not last week, over the past year, I should say, we have been looking at, just different opportunities for the policy conversation. It's a conversation that has started prior to my arrival as well, as it pertains to what Neola could possibly bring to our school district as it pertains to policy information. One of the things that I would like to say is, again, Neola is not new. It's been around for, quite some time now. Many districts across the state uses Neolas for their policy development and policy opportunities. And I thought it'll be a good conversation to have as it pertains to us as a school board, as it pertains to this conversation. I have with me Tim here is with us tonight. He will be doing a quick presentation around the Neola and what they have to offer, and again, just the Neola overall platform. And so, without further ado, again, this is a quick presentation. I believe I asked Tim to present for about 10 to 15 minutes, and of course, questions after that. Naturally, and then we will, continue with the questions if you all have any. And so I'll turn it over to Neola. And I'm sorry.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here tonight. So let me introduce myself a little bit. Tim Onsager, 35 years in education. For 12 years of those 35, I was the superintendent of the Stoughton Area School District. Retired, and like most superintendents, I have failed at retirement. And so now I'm working for Neola and had Neola in my districts that I worked in. And so if you could advance to the next slide. Do you have okay, so what is Neola? So if you click on this, Neola started out as a cooperative in Ohio. It's kind of like our CSIS. And part of their cooperative was policy. And so Neola, that's what Neola stands for. It's the Northeast Ohio Learning Association. And so they started out in Ohio and then branched off on their own. And so if you click through this, so Neola represents right now over 1,600 school districts in 6 states, including Wisconsin. Go ahead. 30 years in Wisconsin. So we've been working with school districts with policies for 30 years in Wisconsin. There's 11 associates in Wisconsin that we have carved up Wisconsin that we deal with or we represent, and we work with the districts. All of us are retired superintendents. All of us have had Neola in our district. So we're very familiar with policy, with school policy and Neola. And the policies, while the corporate office is in Ohio, the policies here are specifically written for Wisconsin. And in fact, we work with 2 law firms. And so if you click on that one more time, Omnis & Davidson and Rennie, Lewis & Lacey, we sit down regularly with our attorneys that work with Neola, and as we craft the policies and as we come up with the policies, they're also there writing the policies, helping us write it with the Wisconsin laws in mind. So go to the next one. And I'll go through this really quickly. And again, we have a staff council on Neola, but they also work with our other two. So Wisconsin districts, and then click on this so we'll get the full page. So currently we work with 330 out of 425 districts, and we work with the districts to reprioritize their board and their administrative time. So we do the heavy lifting, I like to say. We look at what the laws are. We look at what needs to take place. When I was a superintendent before we got Neola, we had policies that we looked at every year. We had some policies that I found that weren't looked at for 20 years. And so as Neola, we regularly look at the policies. We regularly review everything and look at the changes of the law. So it's time and cost savings as well, because it could save you money in your attorney's fees. The state and federal laws are changing rapidly, and it's hard to keep up with them. And also districts have found that they may be unprepared for litigation against their policies and what's going on and the nature of their constituents and other entities. And there should be one more, I believe. And people go to Neola for peace of mind, because we're looking at the policies, we're looking at revising the policies, we're keeping up with state and federal law, so we can have those conversations with you. Next slide, please. So this is actually last year's. This is the number of legislative bills or bills that were proposed and bills that were signed regarding education and all the other entities. And as you can see, education has the most number of bills and legislation that have been adopted, not only by the state, by the federal, by DPI, et cetera. And so we take care of looking at all of that. We track all of those. Our attorneys are regularly looking at that. And there are districts that may work with, by themselves or work with their attorneys, and they're keeping track or trying to with all those. And as a former superintendent, that is a lot of time-intensive energy for not only myself, but my staff. This is Neola's growth chart. This is just through 2022. I can tell you we've added clients since then. In fact, we've added another 4 or 5 clients since September in Wisconsin. And so we continue to grow. We have over 75% of the districts in Wisconsin that are working with us. Next slide, please. So what are the services we offer? We offer a bylaws and policy service where we will work with you to draft your bylaws and your policies, your board bylaws, your policies, and give you some templates to choose from. We also offer administrative guidelines, if you like, which are your operating procedures on how you're implementing those policies. We also have a staff handbook that is aligned to the policies, and we also have forms that go along with the policies that are also available for districts. Next slide, please. Here's just a small sampling of districts in the area that use Neola. And last night, Elkhorn School Board voted, and they are going to start working with us. East Troy just recently came on board, and so this is just a smattering of the districts around here that work with Neola. And we have signed, or Madison signed up for Neola at the end of last year, so we are also working with Madison. Neola's policies are separated into 9 sections. The zeros, the bylaws, are the board, and the board's bylaws and operating process and procedures. The 1000s deal with the administration. 2000s deal with program. 3000s are your licensed staff, your teachers, etc. 4000s are your support staff. And then we have students, finances, property operations, and relations. And all Neola districts are set up under this numbering. So part of being Neola, and you're already using board docs, is your ability to search any of the 1,600 districts for what their policies are relating to a topic. So maybe there's a new topic coming up that you're saying, maybe we want to look at a policy, or how are they doing things? You have the ability to search all 1,600 districts that are part of Neola if you're one of our clients. The process that we take when we work with a district, we meet with the superintendent and other staff as appropriate, and we develop a draft updated policy manual. So we have templates, and we go through those templates, and we say, what do we want to do, and what's unique in Beloit for how the policies should look and how should they sound. And we incorporate your current district policies. And so we'll do a match between your current policy and the Neola template, and we'll do that crosswalk, because there may be things in your current policy you want to keep. There may be things that you want to incorporate into Neola. We include district-specific policies, so if you have a policy that we do not have, we can incorporate those as well. Again, that drafting, as we call it, is facilitated, would be by myself. And it's up to 6 on-site visits and 26 hours of my time to help draft. From there, I notice you have a policy committee. So the districts that have a policy committee, once we draft and get all of that, it's usually reviewed by the policy committee. If you go to the next slide, please. And then if the policy committee looks at it, looks at a policy, looks at and says, we like this, but we want to tweak it, etc., we can make revisions to the draft. Then there's an optional second review by the policy. And then the policies come to adoption by the board, usually a 2-step process. And then it's posted on the district website. We take care of that. We'll set up a separate tab in board docs for your policies. And the timeline is dependent on the district. And so I've seen it as quick as 3 months. It can also take a year or more depending on if there are changes in how fast we want to go. But that's all dependent on the district and how fast or slow you want to go. Next. And then in addition to that, what we call drafting, where we take all your policies and we do that boardwalk between our policies and your policies, Neola comes up with 2 updates a year. And so our last update came out in December, and then we work with you to update your policies. The next one will come out probably May, June. And so we will then do the systematic process to stay current. There's a district-wide visit by the associate. The board reviews and approves the policies, and sometimes there are special updates. I anticipate that the new Title IX regulations that are coming out this spring might be a special update, because in and of itself, that is going to be a huge package. So that may be a special update that we will issue instead of our regular update. And then we automatically update your website with the revisions once they are approved. And then where do our updates come from? Suggested updates come from our national council, our councils that we work with in Wisconsin. Our clients suggest policies saying, we wish we had a policy that did this, or we wish we had a policy that addresses this. And when we meet as associates with our attorneys, we talk about that. So sometimes there are policies that are generated by various school districts around the state. And then again, additional special updates as needed. For example, when COVID hit, there was a special update. Go ahead. And so these are just, you can click through this slide and the next slide. These are just some of the policies that we issued over the last couple years in updates and revisions or new policies. The last update, we actually did a group of 4 policies on AI, which included academic honesty, which included how you're using AI in the classroom, etc. So we keep current and up to date on those. Go ahead, next slide. And so again, as I said, we also have student and staff handbooks. We monitor the posting, publishing, and the review of the policies. We also offer with our board docs platform the basic and advanced keyword searches. And then we do the legal assurances. We stand by our language. So if you are questioned on Neola language, we will help support you if there's any litigation. We will use our attorneys to help support you in litigation. Now, if it's a district-specific policy or if it's district-specific wording, we're going to have to look at that. But anything that we write, we stand behind, and we will, if you are questioned on it, we will back it up with our legal Wisconsin attorneys as well to help you. And again, so every policy template is vetted by Amundsen Davis and Rennie Lewis and Lacey. There's over 400 policies. I think it's 456 policies that you can choose from. Districts don't take all of them, but it's a wide range. Districts usually take about 425 policies that most districts have. And again, it's on-site drafting with a Neola associate using the board docs platform. Next slide, please. And what's the difference between Neola and, say, some other policy services? I like to think, one, it's our updates. One is we keep you current and we're continually working with you. We're continually side by side with you. We're continually available for questions, whether it's a current update or whether it's a current policy and looking at revisions. We incorporate the feedback from all of our districts, and student handbooks are free and updated annually, and the employee handbook is a $250 one-time fee, and that's updated annually if you want to use that, and there's special updates as necessary. But I'd like to say it's our concierge service that sets us apart from other ones. And so this is just a sample what your Neola policy site would look like. And so the rest of the presentation shows you just different examples of what the sites would look like and how you upload or download updates, etc. So instead of going through all of those, you can page through those yourself. I will open up to any questions because I'm sure I've used most of my 10 minutes in going through that, and I want to be cognizant of your time on this cold, wintry night. So are there questions I can answer for you?
Oh, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, one of the things for us as a board, as we're considering how we operate, our governance policy is something that's important. We have been in the mold of this board and boards before us. It's just that, like, they were written by school board members, sometimes written by staff members, regarding certain topics. And I think that one of the things that the reason that we asked for you to come and make presentation is so that we could understand what would be the difference for our board and our effectiveness as we move from, simply writing ourselves as we in that policy rotation review. So if you could speak to, for boards that have transitioned, what were some of the reasons that they found to transition?
So first of all, when we draft, like I said before, if you have certain policies or specific language or policies that you want to keep, we'll incorporate those into your policy handbook, and you can keep those, and we'll just have to look at it as we're working with you as a district of making sure we're looking at those regularly. What I've seen with districts is one of the reasons that districts have gone to Neola is because in this day and age, it's hard to write a policy and know if it legally is sound. The courts are continually changing. The courts are continually coming out with different rulings. The legislators are changing. And so one of it is the peace of mind, because in a normal setting, and I'll take Stoughton, for example, before we had Neola, I would work with the policy committee. We would write things, and a lot of times I would then send it to our attorney, and we use Boardman and Clark, and they would read it over to make sure that we were not skirting or we were not crossing a line. And then we would go back and talk to policy committee. So that became costly if we're vetting a lot of policies through our attorneys. We do that for you. Another thing that districts have found is that they're actually looking at more of their policies more often. As I said, most districts find that there's a handful of policies that they look at every year, and they have the best intentions of, we're going to take all of our policies and on a rotating basis, we're going to look at them. But what usually happens in reality is you get bogged down on a couple policies, and it's usually the same policies over and over again, that you still have policies that haven't been looked at for 10, 15, 20 years. Not to say that there's anything wrong with the policies. They may still be perfectly fine and still maintain the legal, meet the legal essence of the law. But or districts know that with Neola, we're constantly looking at all of our policies and figuring out if we need to revise, review, rescind, replace it with a new one. What districts, their policies committees usually do is, at least twice a year, they're working with Neola policies because we have an update. That first year of drafting, they're more involved because we're going through every single policy in the district and we're reviewing them. So sometimes it may take a little longer than a year, sometimes less. And then once all of that is set, they're at least twice a year. But some districts, their policy committee meets monthly or every other month because they want to take a look at some of their maybe district-specific policies, or they just want to make sure that they're reviewing all the policies they can and are familiar with it, or they're talking about, are there new policies that should be incorporated into their policy manual? And that's where sometimes I get the recommendations from other districts of saying, our policy committee has met. We would really like to see a policy on X. And then I would take it to the Neola meeting with the attorneys and it'd be discussion. And if it's something that we feel that is beneficial for all of our districts, we will incorporate that. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a district specific policy on that as well.
All right, thank you so much. Board Member Levy has her hand up, and then Board Member Anderson, if you wanted to chime in, you're welcome to as well. Go ahead, Amy.
Oh, I am perfectly fine with letting Board Member Anderson go since he's a part of the committee. I can wait.
Well, I'll jump in, but obviously as chair of our policy committee, I'm looking forward to your opinion too, Amy, but as long as I'm on, so is most of the support clerical to make sure that wording is correct and legal is vetted, or do you get involved more substantively on, are you recommending on any substance of any particular policy? Because you mentioned this catalog of policies that many districts use.
Right.
And, obviously each district's needs are different from the other. So what's the balance between just making sure we're covered legally and giving advice on what you would do if you were us, right? That's kind of
right.
A balance.
So any policy that we come out with, so when we look at drafting, there will be a bunch of policies that we will say, this is required by law. You need these policies required by state or federal or DPI to have a policy on this. And those range from harassment to, discrimination to some of your financial policies, whole breadth of them. There are other policies that we will say, we recommend these policies. We recommend that you have a policy. So we came out with a policy just in this last update on staff members breastfeeding expressing milk. It's a state and federal law. Okay, you don't necessarily have to have a policy on that, but we strongly recommend that you have a policy on. So there are then policies that you don't by law have to have a policy on this, but we'll strongly recommend them. And then there are some policies that will say, you know, these are nice to have, and we can tell you most districts take it or most districts do not take this. And it also depends on the district. So for example, I was working with a district last week that we have a policy, a Fund 80 policy. They do not have Fund 80. So that was a policy they didn't take because they did not have Fund 80. I was working with a district in November, and one of the policies that we were revising was our school resource officer. They don't have a school resource officer, so that's a policy they didn't want to take because it doesn't apply to them. So it's a combination of all those things. It's a combination of clerical. It's a combination of recommendation. It's a combination of, if we were in your shoes, this is our recommendation. But ultimately, it's your decision as the district and as the board of which policies you take and what they say, because they're your policies. They're the Beloit policies. They're not the Madison policies, or they're not the Monona Grove policies, or the Elkhorn policies, or the East Troy policies. They're Beloit policies. And so one of the things is working with you to make sure that the policies reflect the culture and this community in this district.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Anderson. Great questions. Board Member, so I have some questions too, but I'm going to wait until everybody else has had a shot. So go ahead, Board Member Levy.
Thank you. And thank you so much for this presentation. I'm surprised that as the policy chair, I wasn't notified that this presentation was happening. But I'm glad that I was able to join, and our discussion at the booth last week was really helpful. I'm also glad to hear that Neola has administrative regs, because currently we have one. So I just definitely look forward to continuing the conversation. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks. I just had a couple of questions. I was curious, we had an ad hoc committee several years ago that looked at removing language barriers. One of the recommendations that came out of that ad hoc committee was to translate everything into Spanish. And I know we've had a number of conversations over the years, but none recently, just about how costly that is, especially as we continue to update pieces. Is there a service included with Neola that will translate to different languages?
To be honest with you, I have not been asked that question before. And so that is something that I will have to take a look at. And if I can get back to you, that would be great, because I don't want to misspeak and say yes or no when that service is available. So again, I haven't been asked that, but I will definitely find that out.
I really appreciate that, because like, not only would it be, and I'm just, to my colleagues who are here this evening, I think that would be really beneficial to our district, obviously for our Spanish speaking community, but I know that like if that service does exist in Neola already, there are certainly languages besides Spanish that exist in our community. And I think that would be a wonderful thing to explore if that's possible. And then my other question, when you were talking, you had, we're kind of clicking through in the presentation, different, like just different, I guess, like entities that like weigh in and kind of give feedback on policies. So to what extent, I guess like I have a two-part question. So to what extent does Neola work with, I mean, I guess like underrepresented communities and their voices that might not be present? Like oftentimes school boards don't necessarily reflect the community like in its entirety. So I'm kind of curious, like, have we looked at how Neola engages, I guess, like maybe potentially underrepresented voices of stakeholders that may exist in a school district? And also, has there, since Neola's been around for 30 years, I'm really curious, since we're a younger board, we haven't really had the opportunity to do this. Has there been work to look at the outcomes, unintended maybe, and intended outcomes of the policy work that you've done, and maybe the impact that's had for equity in terms of student academic and other outcomes?
So Neola continually works with different statewide groups and different statewide organizations to get input on their policies and different groups. And so, for example, we just revised our suicide prevention and intervention policy, and we pulled together people from the state who are experts in suicide intervention and prevention. We've worked with various groups across the state. Some of them, you know, as you indicated, underrepresented groups, so that we're looking at how do we have the breadth of policy. But one of the things with policy is policies are, if they're written well, should be apolitical. They should be, they're just policies. It's your operating procedures that you as a district and how you implement the policy is the things that you want to look at to see what effect they're having on it. Our policies are written broad enough that, again, you can make the choices of how you want to do it based on the culture of the district. But again, it's, as an educator and as a superintendent, I knew what the policy said, but the policy was only a guideline or the parameter in which I operated in. How I implemented the policy was what I studied to see what effect it had on the students. And so sometimes those, you know, implementation strategies is what I had to tweak or what we had to change because that was having a negative effect on students or it was having a positive effect on student outcomes, and we wanted to replicate it.
I really appreciate that. I guess my last kind of follow-up kind of along those lines is, you know, we unfortunately know that Wisconsin is the worst state in the country for Black and brown children. And so I'm wondering, since you work with, I think you said 6 different states, have we, or not we, but has Neola looked at what policies are maybe more effective for improving academic outcomes or improving equitable outcomes in those other states and how those might be better implemented in Wisconsin? I'm just kind of curious if work like that exists, and if not, that's totally fine.
Neola does corporate Neola, or you know, the corporate headquarters in Ohio regularly brings in groups from all the different states to have this conversation about what's working well, what's not. But sometimes by state statute, we're not able to replicate or we're not able to implement a policy in one state versus another because every state's laws and regulations are different. So we have to operate within Wisconsin's regs and
No, that makes a ton of sense. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Board Member Anderson, and I'm going to step back and let President Levy take over. Thanks.
Actually, I was raising my hand until Member Levy got on. He has a question, actually.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Megan, for getting us started here. Whew. You can do a lot of things, but you can't drive in. You can't do it all. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
One of the other questions I had about like the policy implementation, as you stated, with Neola, boards can adopt. Here's the series of policies they adopt, and boards can continue to have their own existing local policies. And so we have the backing from Neola for the things that are a part of the package that we've taken on. And we have the same backing from our own attorneys with the other things that we choose that are not a part of Neola's package.
Right.
So it's got the same defense that we had before we used Neola. One of the other things that you did mention too were the administrative guidelines and regulations, which is I've worked in a district where we had Neola policies, and for one of the things I've been concerned about and I've expressed it to Dr. Garrison, is that the lack of administrative regulations that we have currently in our district. So when you have an effective superintendent and you have stability and leadership, you know, administrative things can be directed by that administrator. Right. But in the absence of that stability of leadership and know-how, or someone providing direction to the administrators, without those administrative guidelines, how do we implement our sexual harassment policy? So those are some of the concerns. Can you speak just a little bit more about the administrative regulations and what that provides for a district and administrators.
And so you're right on. So one of the things that I believe firmly in, and when I was a superintendent for 12 years and when I retired, is it should not, how the district operates should not be dependent on one person. Should not be dependent on who's sitting in the district administrator seat. And some boards don't like to hear this, but it shouldn't depend on who's sitting at the board table. It should be, if somebody leaves, we should be able to carry on exactly as we are. And sometimes that's good, that sometimes that's bad, and that's where we need to take a hard look internally to make sure we're continually improving. The administrative guidelines are the how-tos. How do we implement the policy? How do we operate? The administrative guidelines are also a good use for your administrative team, because here's the policy. If a situation happens, here's the policy, but the administrative guidelines also tells me what steps we want to take for it. So, for example, there are administrative guidelines on challenges to educational material. So while the policy says here's parents or community members can challenge a book, it goes then to a review committee. How does that review committee operate? How does it function? Who makes up that committee? It could be in policy, but a lot of times that's administrative guidelines. It's the how-to type of thing. And so that's another service that Neola has. Usually what districts will do is they'll start with the policies. They want to make sure that their policies are firm, their policies are strong, and we have that. And then we start the administrative guidelines and draft them so that we know here's the policy, and this is what it says. Let's make sure that our administrative guidelines align to that, and then take it the step further on how to do this.
Also, another question, kind of going to like implementation of a sexual harassment investigation by policy. So there's a policy, and then, like you said, administrative guidelines about how to do that. When those updates come, because like you said, that's in that Title IX series,
Yep.
some things, and going, maybe 3 or 4 years back, there was a big change to that. Like I said, there's more things coming. But like when we're tailoring because like working with Neola is not an abdication of a school board's responsibility to maintain our policies. We're not just saying we don't think about policy anymore.
Right.
Neola does all of that for us. There's still, like I said, the committee meeting and the whole board still have to approve changes or adoptions to our policies. So kind of like going back to that Title IX example, because I might be missing this, but there's specific points like when you're in an investigation, whether the standard that the district is using is a preponderance of evidence or some other standard of evidence. With Neola, are those the choice points that as boards we have to decide, like, Phil, your board has to decide what word you're going to put in this blank? So.
Correct. So our policies and our administrative guidelines as well, we have templates. So there are things where it'll say you can choose, here's option 1, option 2, option 3. Sometimes you'll choose all the options. Sometimes we're only choosing option 1 because this is a route we want to take. But all the options are legally vetted. So you have the assurance that whatever option you choose has been vetted and meets statutory requirements, meets legal, et cetera. But it gives you the choice as a board and as a district to say, what route do we want to take? Because one of the things that we know is Beloit is different than Rhinelander, Wisconsin. Different part of the state, different culture, different community, et cetera. So we want to make sure that we meet the broad spectrum, and we're trying to tailor as much as we can to each individual district. That doesn't mean that you can't say, you know what, we don't like any of those 3 options. And as you said, you could run it by your own attorneys, and they will then back whatever that is, because you've run it by the language by them. And so that section, they put their stamp of approval on. It's when districts write their own and don't get legal advice for it that worries me and gets me a little nervous about if they're challenged.
So I don't know if other hands are up. I'm checking because there's like one more question I have. Now talk to me about price.
Okay.
There, some community member may be thinking, well, they just write their own policies. You're just spending more money. What, along with price, because this is a service, but like what is the incentive or what is the gain? And then what's the specific number?
Okay. So the incentive and the gain is we're looking at the policies. We're making sure that when new laws or new regs come out, we're addressing those. We're making sure that when, we've been waiting for Title IX. Title IX updates were supposed to come out last March. Then they were supposed to come out in October. Now they're supposed to come out in February. So we've been gearing up for when they come out. And then we're expecting that this is going to be a huge undertaking as far as changes to it. And so some of it is time for your administrative team. Some of it is time for you as a board, because when you have multiple things that come out, it takes a lot of time intensive, and that's resources, the time resource that you can't get back because you have to go through the law, interpret the law. There's also you're going to check with your own attorneys on it. What does it mean, et cetera. And sometimes districts are using the exact same attorneys that we've already contracted with for Neola, and they're paying for what we're already paying them for. The upfront cost is what is most costly, and that's to draft. So it's a little over $17,000 for the policies. And so, as you said, it's not a contract, it's a subscription service. So that $17,000 will get us working together, looking at your current policies, looking at Neola policies, and coming up and drafting all the policies. From there, you could say, that's all we want to do. You have the policies updated to that point, and they're your policies, okay? But then it's roughly $3,500 a year from there on, and that includes 2 updates and any special updates that may come out. And that also then having an associate work with the administration and the board to update these policies and to keep them current every year.
So kind of listening at $17,000 up front, and then the subscription service about $3,500.
Yep.
And even if you say that first $20,000, that's what we've lessened is possibly the amount of money we pay our own attorney to do policy work for us,
right,
and the time that we're saving our administrator and our board in terms of having somebody else chew it for us before, as we come back to it with appropriate time for us to make decisions for ourselves. So we're saving, possible savings of time and money,
right,
and focus, because we do have lots of things to do as a board.
Right.
Okay. Dr. Garrison, just a question. What do you think?
So, I've worked with Neola before in the past and other districts, and I think that, they are a wonderful service to many school districts across the state of Wisconsin. One of the things that I've tried to, do is, be consistent in the work. And, Neola has been consistent in policy conversations. And like they said, over the past 30 years here in the school districts across the state, multiple districts around us use them. One of the things that I like about what they already do is, again, they have that legal insurance. Of course, if there's some litigations that we need to kind of go into with our policies, Neola is already ready to do that. I also like the simple fact that they upload or update twice a year. And so when you're thinking about policies and like he showed in the screens in the presentation, I should say, education has more updates than any other law, and so any other laws, I should say. And so just seeing that sheer number of updates that comes with being a part of Neola and having some of those cadences in place is just a great platform. And so, that's just my thoughts. Again, another thing I liked about Neola is, again, and working in other school districts, again, they make it customizable for your school district. Like Mr. Tim has already stated, there may be some policies that we want to keep that's ours, and we just keep those policies. There may be some policies we want to update that we, use those for updates. As already mentioned by Board Member Levy, we don't have any administrative regulations, and that's something that we do need to develop. But you also know we have, hundreds of policies that will require us to, really start digging deep into that. And so having these admin regs, walking through what we want to see in our own school district for future conversations will be also very important. One of the last things I would just note is that when you're thinking about policy work, again, it's ongoing. And I think it's already been mentioned, it's beyond both, me and of course the board. It's continuous, right? And as long as you want to, be in this conversation, there's going to be some form of updates as it pertains to policy. And so that continuous improvement thought process being built into the conversation with Neola beyond any of us is also something that I think is very important. So that's just some of my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Levy, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Board President Levy. Just for clarification, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding, let's say that we're using a Neola policy and it's challenged legally. Neola does not provide all of the lawyer input to defend that case. They work as a part of our established legal team, or at least that is the understanding I walked away with last week from the convention after speaking with reps from their booth. Is that accurate, that Neola is a part of our legal team, but not the sole kind of legal defense if we were challenged?
Correct. So anytime you're challenged legally, you're going to want your own attorney being the lead because they know your district, or they should know your district more intimately than if you have an outside attorney, somebody who is just coming off fresh. But our attorneys will help supplement, our attorneys will help kind of with the case, and then there's some financial things that we will help with as far as the legal backing of it.
No, thank you so much for that clarification. I just didn't want it to come across as if we were challenged. Nope, Neola's got it. We're good. That our attorneys still have a role in that. So thank you for that clarification.
Thank you for the question.
All right. So any other board member have any other questions regarding Neola? And then a last one, and then one for Dr. Garrison. So kind of like when people, when boards adopt to go with Neola, what is the process from engagement to here are your policies, and they're live in the website for people to see?
So it's district dependent, and so and how fast and how slow you want to go. So normally what happens is we will start with a bunch of policies. So we'll maybe start with the zeros, which deal with the board. I will sit down with the administrative team, with Dr. Garrison and the team, and we will go through those. What usually happens then in districts that have a policy committee, they usually then take sections to the policy committee, and the policy committee then looks at all the policies in that section. They kind of give their approval, or they say, we really like this option, or we want to go in a different direction with this one, etc. So it could go back to the administrative team to revise, and it could go back to the policy committee then for their approval and blessing of that. Now, some districts then will take that section to the entire board and let the board look at that and vote on that section. Some districts say, since it's gone through a policy committee, we're going to wait till we have all the sections done, and we're going to take the whole policy manual to the board, and then let the board kind of, go through all of them, ask questions for anything. And as I said, policies is a two-step process. Some do it 2 steps, some do it, their 2 steps are, we may see the initial policies in March, and we don't see it again until May because we want to give everybody a chance to really look and digest it, or they use 3 readings, etc. But once the entire manual is approved, then Neola will load it to your website. We'll create that part of the website. You already use Board Docs, so it's really easy because it's already there. We'll create a separate tab that says policies, and it'll be there for administration and staff and the board, but it'll also have a public facing thing that the public can look at every one of your policies and search for. If they have, let's say, non-discrimination, they can use the keyword search and every policy that mentions non-discrimination will come up.
Right, and as an example, with that community focus part, the community members go in and can access the site so they see the board policies. If we also have the administrative guidelines, there, if a parent or a community member had a dispute about the way that it was handled by the administrator, they could read the administrative guidelines and say, well, your administrative guidelines say you're supposed to follow this procedure. And that's what a parent or community member would be saying that, well, and the question for us would be, did your administrator do what your policies and regulations say you do?
Right. Some districts choose not to make their administrative guidelines public. I would say most do. Not every district takes administrative guidelines. Mm-hmm. And so that's a decision by the district, by the board, by the administration of what is public. All the policies have to be public by state statute, but the administrative guidelines don't necessarily have to be. So that's a conversation, a local conversation of what you want to share. Likewise, some districts take the staff handbook that Neola has, which is a $250 one-time fee, and then we update it annually for free. Some people put that on their public portal, some do not. So those are all decision points and conversations that we would have over the course of the drafting.
Okay. And then Dr. Garrison, just as we saw that, understand that financial cost, is this something that we would be able to afford?
Well, that's a conversation that, first, once the board decides the direction we have to go in, naturally, I would have to, meet with Mr. Chady to see where we would put this into the budget. If this is something the board wants, again, we would have to make sure that we have the money to pay for it. And so it wasn't a question that I was exploring tonight. It was more so just to bring information to the board. But that would be something that we would have to look into if the board does want to go in this direction.
All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate you coming down. Yep. All right. We are now going to move forward to 3, engagement, agenda cadence. Dr. Garrison.
Sure. This is going to be a very short agenda cadence conversation. I only have one slide, and then I got time for questions. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is just kind of bring the board up to speed around some thoughts that I have as it pertains to agendas and how we do agendas here in our school district. But that's a all-encompassing conversation. As it stands, you all know that we currently have our board meetings pretty much every, of course, first and third Tuesdays, and then we start with our committee meetings. And then from our committee meetings, we have our HR meeting, and of course, the regular board meeting starts at 7. Now, with that being stated, one of the things that I was thinking about doing is the possibility of us having committees of the board again. It's not something that's new to the school district of Beloit, but just a little bit different how we can actually make it actually work. The board meetings could possibly start at 6 o'clock, as the governance council meeting starts here at 6. Our committee meetings start at 5:30. Of course, our HR meetings, as it stands, of course, starts at 6:30. I thought we could probably meet somewhere in between, and then, of course, have a regular board meeting to start here at 6 o'clock. That's the first change that will need to be made. Second thing I was thinking about was, well, how can we still carry the conversations forward in each of our specific committees? The first thing we will do is look at, of course, the first Tuesday. Typically in the first Tuesday, the committee meeting that meets is the Business Service and Operation and Finance Committee. That will be part of the regular 6 o'clock starting of our board meeting. Okay, so we will still be able to cover a committee of the whole now in this conversation, or full board meeting, where we'll talk about all the business information, and everybody will be able to get the information at the same time. Those conversations will still be on the cadence to follow about an hour, maybe an hour and a half time frame. I'm sorry, about an hour time frame, because that's kind of what we have right now. Not kind of, that's what we have right now. About a 50-minute type of conversation, followed by general board items, and that could be things from referendum conversations to community conversations that we may want to have, as well as a board regular agenda items, followed by the HR conversation. All those things could be captured in a regular board space, starting again at 6 o'clock. The second Tuesday of each month, we typically have our teaching, learning, and equity and people services meeting, again, followed by a possibility of having some general board items, and then HR once again. My goal is that our board meetings should end within about an hour and a half to 2 hours for all of our board meetings. That's the general goal that we currently have, even in our current policy. The policy committee will remain on the first Wednesdays. As I stated, the previous conversations was really geared to just give information, but the policy committee will remain on the first Wednesdays as it stands. And then the only thing that we would probably need to do is suspend the current setup that we currently have that's governed by policy to move to a specific conversation as such. And so again, board meetings could be able to start at 6 o'clock, and then followed by the first Tuesdays being business operations and finance. General board items could be added to that conversation along with HR. Second Tuesday could do the same thing, teaching, learning, equity, and people services, followed by general board items and HR. And then again, the policy committee will remain on the first Wednesdays, as we've typically have had them since I've been here. And so this is just a thought I wanted to bring to the board to kick around with the governance committee as it pertains to, how we could possibly have all of our meetings at the same time, and it'll allow us to possibly have, I'm going to say a condensed time frame, but more of a condensed time frame where everybody can get the information at the same time. And again, this is just a cadence that I was thinking about, but I wanted to bring it to governance and hear you all's thoughts. So I'll take questions.
All right. First, just to say thank you to Dr. Garrison. He's been here over, a little bit over a year now. And one of the things that we've talked about is, of course, our effectiveness, our efficiency, what things can be done. When we think about our current setup, we did move to that after some time working with Dr. Kieser into a cadence. And then after Dr. Kieser, there's a different number of agenda items that we needed to accomplish. And so I feel that we were set up for how we needed to be then. And now that we are where we're at, we need to address how do we want to be set up going forward. This is just the beginning part of a conversation, as I asked Dr. Garrison to provide a look at that and for board members to have feedback. I think that, for all of us, we're interested in coming to do the work and then leaving. We do understand that deliberation and getting 7 people to achieve, the will of the board, what 4 of the 7 of us are thinking, or whatever the majority is at that meeting. And we've taken time and we've worked together to do that. But this is a aim at kind of talking about how do we want things to be structured in the future. One of the things that I'll say, and Board Member Levy, I do see your hand, is that even with the agenda items and construction of agendas, Dr. Garrison and I have been scaling back on the items, because I think that for where we're at as a board, and now that we have an effective administrator who is serving the district, and there's some longevity even in that year of stability, and the types of things that we're facing is, in essence, there's a little bit less for us to do as a board, because we're not trying to hire business managers and superintendents and deal with all manner of superintendent searches at the same time. But that we have administrators and we have people in place And, you know, our goal is that every day is a regular day of school and a regular day of business operations in the district. And so, as we have not been responding to millions of emergencies, and necessitating the different need to pile our agenda up with different things, you know, we've tried to scale back in what needs to actually be done at a school board meeting, and handle all of our required business. So the agenda items have been kind of tailored. Like if you look over them, you'll see they're trying to go to one item in certain meetings. You know, and then some things are just going to take, it's like lightning. You don't know where it'll strike. Some things are just going to, you know, they inflame and light up people's passion, and we'll go a little bit longer on them. But in general, trying to streamline the meetings and our purpose. The one part that I'll add before I pass it over to Board Member Levy is just in this setup, you have to think about what it is for us to be working as committee of a whole, because that's all 7 of us attending. But if you think about for where we're at, some of the things that we kind of came to, some unwritten things of trying to have things presented to us twice in committee meetings, so people felt comfortable understanding what they were going to vote on, that creates a cadence of the work and how things have to flow. And then, you know, when things come to our consent agenda, if they've been worked through, and then we have the opportunity to ask questions, and, you know, by removing things from the consent agenda, things will go. But sometimes it might be a complete reach-you on the consent agenda. If we're working in committee of the whole, then all 7 of us are hearing things and able to take action on it. So those are just some of the things that are brought up in the proposal, and nothing is a commitment, just that we need to talk about it so we can get ourselves positioned for what we would like to do to address things that have come up already. Board Member Levy.
Thank you for acknowledging me, but I just want to be respectful that I am not a member of this committee. So if members of the committee have questions, I would ask that they go first, please.
Board Member Miller or Anderson, and I see we have Board Member Schneider on with us also. So I'll take the committee members first, and anybody else afterwards. We're really just talking about how we're working and how to make it better.
Board Member Anderson, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. So first of all, I love the idea of talking about how we can be more efficient. I love that. And I think we can be more efficient and still more effective at the same time. I think we have some smart people here that can walk and chew gum at the same time. So I like that. This proposal, you know, it shows the kind of the full range of meetings that first Tuesday and the second Tuesday. I guess what jumps out at me as a possible concern is on a 5-week month, we would go with no meetings on either of what had been traditional committees or the full board or HR on a 3rd Tuesday, a 4th Tuesday, potentially a 5th Tuesday. And you could have 4 weeks in between meetings.
I see what you're. I was thinking I'll have to go back and look at when that would happen. But if there's ever a reason why we need to have another meeting, we can always have a special meeting naturally. That could cover the space between the meetings, Mr. Anderson, as you're mentioning. You know, last year, you know, we've had hundreds of meetings since I've been here, literally. And so, you know, we haven't missed a beat in that thought. And so naturally, if this was the thought that we needed to go to and we needed to have another meeting, you know, that's something that I would need to accommodate the board if that's something that we would need, right? And so if that's a space that gets pretty far in between, like you just mentioned, then we could always have a special meeting put in between that time if needed.
Yeah, no, I get that, and I know, you know, we're not afraid to have a special meeting, but I think by design, this is laid out as the first Tuesday, second Tuesday, and is there a reason for that as opposed to say the first Tuesday and the third Tuesday that would naturally break up that gap?
You're 100%.
Oh, you just muted yourself, Dr. Garrison.
You are 100%, you are 100% correct. I stand corrected. Let's just say first and third Tuesday, as that's our cadence, not first and second. That's my apologies.
Perfect. Thank you.
Not a problem.
No, you're fine. I took that I through the presentation figured out that you meant like the first time we meet, the second time we meet. But Brian, I thought the same thing. So yeah, I also would miss hanging out with you. That's too long to go without a meeting. All right, no. So no, I really like the spirit. I'll echo what Brian said. Like I really appreciate the spirit of efficacy. You know, that this is leaning toward. I do have a couple of concerns. And so I want to start with I definitely want to put out there that I love the idea of doing HR at the end. I think it's much more respectful of people's time because HR issues like that's the committee where we deal potentially with some complicated stuff. And I think we need to have the amount of time necessary to deal with it without the pressure of like, oh my gosh, we have to hurry up and get to the regular board meeting. I think it's very wise to put HR at the end. And jump back to my notes. I like the idea of the reduction in efficiency of agenda items. As you know, Sean said beautifully, we have a superintendent, we have people hired in place to do all the things, and we're not burdened right now with a superintendent search or anything that requires us to meet all the time. And, you know, I like this idea of noticing where we're at in the organization and development that we are in and stepping back and sizing our work appropriately. So I really wanted to complement those two pieces. I'm not sure that I'm quite ready. I'm going to need to sit with the idea of committees of the whole. The reason for, and I mean, I could live with it. I think that I like sort of, I don't know if intimacy is the right word. I just feel like when there's a smaller group of people, it's a little bit easier to parse through complicated ideas. And I think there was a really good reason that we went to smaller committees. I also want to just caution, although I don't think that what you've put out here necessarily means it will be like this, but in the past, there was sort of like some messiness to just bringing things up to the board without having them properly parsed through and have us all hash them out like at a general board meeting. And while that's not exactly what you're proposing, the back-to-back nature and like starting the board meeting with the committee work feels dangerously like we're rubbing up against a past practice that really wasn't effective. It also, you know, and I don't know,
So
I mean, yeah, if you want to jump in on that, like that's cool. I have a lot of concerns about that piece.
and I think that's, you know, duly noted. I think one of the things that, you know, I think we all have to remember too is that, you know, there's, you know, different leadership, and that's currently here. Naturally, there's a different board that's currently sitting, right? And I think, you know, as you know, we continue to work on our cadence and how we, you know, work together to get certain things done, those conversations can happen. I know we use the word committee of the whole, but this will be a regular board meeting, okay? So we would have to step away from the thought of like this is a full committee conversation, regular, versus this is a regular board meeting with these are the agenda items. And we would work through those, whether it's one time or two times, just like we would do it in the committee meetings, just to make sure that everyone is, you know, kept abreast around what is actually happening. Now, my goal again is to make things a little more, time manageable. Naturally, we typically start at we start at 5:30 currently, and you know we can go to whatever the time is, and so that's a 4 or 5 hour commitment for some of us. From a board member's perspective. In this case right here, we will be, possibly moving that time down to about 2 hours of time for everyone that's involved. One of the things that I want the board to understand, it is my goal to make your jobs, just a little bit easier as well. That's the goal of, every district administration. Well, it should be, especially when working with boards. I believe that the work that we can do in these 2 hour, within this 2 hour time frame, could work out. Now, again, if it doesn't and we need to go back to our committees, then we just would, reopen our committee work and go back to the cadence that naturally we've been working from since I've been here. And so I just want to make sure you are aware that when I say a committee of a whole, this would be a regular board meeting with all members present. and we'll work through TLE conversations, business conversations, and of course, general board items along with HR.
Yeah, and so I appreciate everything that you're saying there. I don't have any problem with starting us up at 6 and following that order. I think at this, I want to hear what other board members have to ask and say, but I'm really not interested in not having committees. I think with teaching, learning, equity, and people services, for example, I mean, I can speak to that. I think starting that at 6 with the idea that we would be done by 7 in time to start the general board meeting, and then concluding with HR, which is like already a committee of the whole, that makes a ton of sense to me. I'm not feeling great about, I mean, there's a reason that we have committees, and I get that there's really good leadership, and you know, I'm happy overall with how our board functions together. I think the purpose to me of a committee is to give us space to deep dive and get into kind of messy conversations that need to be had so that we can produce good work. And I think that when that's contextualized and like a whole board meeting, that sort of takes away from the accessibility, I think, to the public too, because like we want to be bringing like the public, here's our finished product, here's our discussion and vote. There's a lot of red flags for me, but I'm going to hold my thoughts now. Thank you.
Okay. Brian Anderson.
So I guess as we're chewing on this, the one thing that popped in my head real quick is that there would be a positive thought on the efficiency is, you know, I know there's more, I shouldn't say more times than not, but there's been plenty of times when, because of the language of our meeting start times, you know, when it's worded as it'll start at such and such a time, let's say, you know, my committee meeting for whatever reason got done and we've got a 35-minute wait time because we can't start because we stated the start time of the meeting. I think there's some time to be recaptured there. So I just, you know, it's a separate issue from what Board Member Miller was talking about, but I just want to throw that out as something that I just recognize as a potential benefit too.
Can I just add to?
Yeah, I think.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, you know, for that, like, you know, for that proper notice and posting, like you wouldn't want something to slide in and get started and people didn't have an idea to know when it was going to be. But at the same time, when we're posting and if we're able to get done earlier, then we're not able to start the next meeting. So, you know, like I said, the agenda posting and notice so that citizens have the opportunity to participate is an important part of that. And that's, you know, even, you know, no matter how we set these up and have a flow, they have to get posted. So that is something that has to get worked out too. Dr. Garrison.
No, what I was going to say is I also think it's very important to note that, you know, as we kind of work through any type of case that the board would like to see, you know, these are still, you know, your meetings with the administration, right? And so this is an attempt for us to, again, see how we can streamline certain conversations so that, you know, they can be more efficient throughout our entire time together. Now, with that being stated, I know Mrs. Miller mentioned that, you know, starting at 6 with the regular committee meetings and then moving into the regular board meeting that starts at 7 and having HR, you know, towards the end. Again, those are conversations that, you know, that we haven't had, and that's why we're bringing it to the Governance Council. And I just want to note that in the conversation that this is not an attempt to hijack any current, you know, processes that we have, more so than it is for us to actually look at what else could we actually be doing to better have an efficient overall board meeting. Now, I will say that there was one point that I'm forgetting to add here. I will say when we have our meetings, you know, again, it's also guided by policy. And if we were to, you know, again, look at the policy, I think it's policy 171 and that board member Levy mentioned in a previous conversation. If we were to extend the time, then we would need to follow the policy, and then that'll give us that extra time, or we have to bring stuff into the next conversation. And that could also be something that we would look at from just a cadence conversation as we look at, you know, our time for our board meetings.
Right. Another thought that I'm thinking about is, I know it's a lot to try to fit all those things into those different first and third meeting. Is there any way policy could end up on a Tuesday also? But, and like I said, it's just the fact that this is our first thought about the work that we are all doing together. And then, like I said, that some things to be discussed. Board Member Levy.
Thank you. So just a couple thoughts. One, just for clarification, the policy committee, you're recommending that we remain on the first Wednesday. And I think it's really important for the type of work that we do in policy and the discussions that we have, that is a separate night. There is no way in the world we could do either business ops and finance or teaching, learning, equity, and people service, a general board member, HR, and then attempt to do policy. I think that would be a disaster. Dr. Garrison, are you recommending that policy remain a 3-person committee? Or are you recommending that also shift to a committee of the whole?
I'm recommending that it stay what it is right now. You know, our cadence is, you know, we work through the policy sets. It's kind of what we've gotten, you know, what we've gotten used to. I think that works. That if we did keep it separately, unless Mrs. Levy, you being the policy chair, if you was willing to come in earlier, and then we could capture it all on the same day. On a Tuesday.
I think capturing it all on the same day is a disaster. I don't care if we start at 3 p.m. I think that, all due respect, I think that's a terrible idea. The other thing, I hear you. The other thing that I will just say briefly, I am definitely not in favor of shifting away everything but policy to a committee of the whole. I think that and I'll just speak for policy because that's the one that I'm intimately familiar with. I think having a representation of the board do a deep dive and thorough work on policy and ask those questions and get the feedback, and then bring all of the edits of the representation of the board and the administration to the full board. I think that works well, and to try to replicate that with all of us, I'm just not in favor of that type of a shift. But however, I am all for effective and efficient. And I think that two things that will help us become more effective and efficient is if, one, we could have postings earlier than Friday. Friday is, and I'm just speaking for myself, weekends are usually filled with kids and family stuff. And so that really leaves for me Monday before the Tuesday meeting. So if we could post earlier, and this is going to sound more critical than it is spoken, but we got to have accurate postings. We got to have consistently accurate postings. And I would appreciate more timely postings. And I think that would give all of us a time to review, to process, to submit questions. And I think that would help our meetings when we do come together to be more efficient and effective.
Megan Miller has a raised hand.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just, as I'm taking all this in, I just wanted to circle back to what you said, Dr. Garrison. I definitely appreciate where you're coming. I appreciate that you brought this discussion because in the 5 years now that I've been on the board, you know, I've seen different iterations of committee work, and I think all of them have had their positives. And I think it's really important, kind of in that spirit of continuous improvement, to kind of monitor and evaluate, right? Like how we move and how we work. And I just wanted to let you know, I appreciate very much your point about, like, this is the type of board we have and this is the type of administration we have. So we need to function and operate in a way that's responsive to, like, who we are, right? You don't step in the same river twice. Things keep changing. I appreciate that very much. I just, as I'm listening to what you're, to where the conversation is going, I also wanted to highlight, Board Member Anderson, what you said. I agree totally. I think 5:30 is way too early to meet. We do end up wasting a lot of time. I cannot recall a time that Teaching, Learning, Equity, and People Services Committee went for more than an hour. I think we've had two that have been like about an hour where it's gotten kind of airtight, but otherwise we don't take that kind of time. So I see what you're saying. Like if it's all captured in, like, this is our board start time, we're starting at 6, then there's no time lost. So maybe as we continue to discuss it, Dr. Garrison, I would really love to hear your thoughts if there's like an option A, option B kind of approach to like if we can keep those committees intact, whether they're the 3-person committees or committees of the whole, if we can keep them intact as committees and still find a way to be a little bit more efficient and realistic with our posting times. Because I think that's an excellent point. Like Board Member Levy, I'm still in favor of the smaller committees. But I am also very curious to hear more about what your vision is for how the committee of whole would work, because I'm open to the idea.
And sure, one of the things that I think you all have also noticed that is that when we have the committee meetings, other board members may not be abreast around what's coming up on the consent agenda. And so naturally, those same items that we've worked through in the committee meetings, come right back up in the, consent agenda. And now we have that time to discuss those conversations, maybe once, maybe twice, depending on if it moves through, of course, the consent agenda. Now, yes, that does happen. Yes, it doesn't, of course, it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. And when it does happen, it's like we're not necessarily repeating the conversation over and over, but more so we have to do that to make sure that all board questions are being answered. I can agree to the thought around, posting and, getting the post done early. But traditionally, and a lot of districts that I work with, Friday is the time that we make the post. And I know there's a huge commitment that comes with, being a board member. And it is my goal to try to get those agendas posted. My goal and any board president's goal to get those agendas posted as early as we possibly can. And so that point is again duly noted. I just go back to, currently when there's something that we move to consent agenda, they can get pulled off, right? And we have that discussion for X amount of time again. And so whether it's, questions that the other board members may have naturally, or maybe they haven't had that 2 times in the committee, right? And it's a time thing that we have to consider. And this could allow us to have those, again, 1 or 2 topics that we full board is getting the same information at the same time. I know we're saying committee of the whole. Again, I want to walk away from that thought and just say this is a full board, regular board meeting, having a regular conversation about whatever business services and operations and finance conversation that we have at that time, right? And it's a full board conversation. And so not to push back, but to push back, these are the thoughts around, just, how this cadence could possibly work. And again, we do get done early in our committees because my cadence have been, 1 or 2 major items is what we need to possibly cover within the time frame that we have, right? Based off of conversations, based off of discussions, based off of just the information. Now, naturally, Bob could tell you he could have 3-4 hours of business services of conversations, right? But that's not something that we are, operating, and that we need to do. Same thing with teaching and learning and equity. That's not something that we need to do. And so those are the thoughts that, comes with this. Again, we are getting done, fairly early with the committee work, and it'll be the same type of feeling in our in this case, regular board meeting work. We'll be covering those topics, possibly a 3rd topic from the general board item, and then we move into HR, which again, HR, sometimes there's things that we need to go into closed sessions about, and sometimes there's not. And so it could be captured in this time frame. And so that's the thought. And again, thank you so much again, Mrs. Miller, as we kind of kick this thought around amongst each other. Thank you so much for your commentary. I believe Mr. Schneider's hand is up.
Yep, Board Member Schneider.
Good evening. I like the idea of the smaller committees, but I do agree that there are enough times that we get a presentation that goes well, we have some questions, and then it goes to the full board where there's another presentation. We can eliminate that by combining those together. An option would be is that if there is something that business operations and finance or teaching, learning, equity, and pupil services committees have something that is going to take some discussion within that committee, then maybe we start those committees at 5:30, and then the board meeting starts after that, so that there's that option to put that committee up front before the board meeting, if there is something that's there that we really need to spend some time on. Just as a way that we can, make things more efficient, but still have that time to hash some things over if we need to do that.
So it's kind of like you're saying, if things start at 6, but be prepared that sometimes things might start at 5:30 to build a little bit more time in. Is that kind of what you're suggesting?
Right. Or that if teaching, learning, and equity has a presentation or something that's coming up that may be a little bit more controversial, or we think that the committee of 3 needs to meet and discuss it first, that they then have that option of meeting like at 5:30. And to be able to go through that piece of it and then move from there into the board meeting where the other agenda items that were more presentation based can just be done once. So to keep both pieces of it.
Okay. Yeah, just kind of sort of along with some of the other conversation, which I'll say I didn't have a full appreciation for what it took as the board president to prepare an agenda. And then I'll say, if you're preparing agendas and you don't have a superintendent, Michelle is great in helping me get those things where they needed to be. And I'll just say that when all you have to do is read what's there, that is a task in reading it. But like I said to Megan, I didn't realize like all that you had to do to get this stuff up here. So it really is a different experience sitting down to get that stuff together. So but I definitely hear you on an earlier posting. And that is something that could get done. Because we've got some things that are built out, and if in any way of the postings as they come out on Friday, that's me and my work with Dr. Garrison as we kind of work together. He is prepared and has always ensured that things got done where they needed to be. So I appreciate that as a partner to make sure that we get those things how they need to be. Of course, we're always trying to do the best for our public. But nobody's perfect, and you don't have to be perfect either. We're just trying to do things the right way, and if they're not done right, we'll stop and do them over to make sure that they are right. But trying to publicly notice meetings and get things set up so that you think about the things that we've done over the last 3 years, that we continue to have momentum, that we address things in a timely manner, like our referendum question, that we do evaluate the superintendent, that we do compensate the teachers, that we have a budget, and address all the other little things that come up, the unexpected things that come up in working as a school board for your community. There's all the things that we know are going to happen that are regular and expected, and then there's the things that we don't plan on happening, that now the board has to change its attention and focus, or what is the amount of time that it takes this group of 7 people to be able to achieve a consensus and a clear direction and work our way through things. So again, like I said, I'm thankful for the for U6 that I work with, for Dr. Garrison too, and that's the importance of the conversation, is because it's not just the 7 of us. But it's also Dr. Garrison and the work that he tries to stabilize for our administrators and our other support staff. What is regular going to look like, in terms of their work and what their Tuesday night might be like as they're doing things too. And then, like I said, our goal to keep our community informed and up to date on what we're doing is really where we're at. So I don't know, for right now, we can just take some feedback. So I'll offer the opportunity, if anybody has one more thing that you want to say or add to the conversation. I think we'll bring this up again in February to kind of talk about it. When Dr. Garrison and I were talking about like implementation, we were just kind of thought that we're so close to April, and then some of this work can already be teed up, and then by the time we get to around maybe March or April, then we'll have a direction to move forward as we go into the next year, depending on however things go, because work still got to get done. So we're trying to set things up for success for everybody involved. Anybody else with one more kick before we move on to the next item? Amy Levy.
Just very briefly, and I don't want to be super redundant, but if posts are going to happen on Friday and there's not a desire, or it doesn't seem like, to push that up, then I think for me, I'm just speaking for myself, I think it's an unreasonable request to ask for questions ahead of time, if we're sticking to that Friday timeline.
Understood. And likewise, if posts happen on Wednesday, then for the benefit of our administration, and then all board members, because some of those questions will be answered again. But then also, too, I do know that sometimes when we ask questions, they're questions for us, but they're also questions for other community members. And we still want to give highlight to that in the meeting sometimes. But for the, and there's a question that'll come up on demand, kind of when you're in the moment, when you hear something. But yeah, if we get postings out on Wednesday, we would need board members to get questions to the administration, in an earlier time frame, just so we can have a flow of work together. And it's not taken as critical. It's taken as what this conversation is intended to do, is figure out how the 8 of us can work better together and keep our work successful and on track. So I understand
appreciate that. And I think what you just stated is wholly reasonable. Just for clarification, the part that I didn't want to be received as overly critical, but I'm very serious about, is consistently accurate post. That also has to be a priority. Thank you.
Okay. So it was Amy Levy's last kick. Anybody else for the last kick? And then I asked Dr. Garrison just to close out on that, a thought before we move on.
I mean, I think one of the things is that it's always our goal to make sure that everything we do is 100% correct. And fortunately, in this work, sometimes we have to make those corrections. And again, I always like to just say that that's not our goal. To have corrections, or the board have to receive corrections when we do have them. Overall, I believe we are consistent in our postings, and there's not many changes that we may have to have, but when they are, I take full responsibility for those things that do happen in our district. And again, that's not my goal to make it more convoluted for any board member, and it's duly noted as well. And I didn't take it critical as a critical thought. Just wanted to make sure I shared that as well.
Okay, seeing nobody else, we're going to move to 3B, referendum and the board. And ask Dr. Garrison to take us there.
Okay, give me 1 second to pull it up here. So one of the things that I didn't get a chance to do last year was to really have conversations with you all around, like, what can the board do? What can staff members do? Like, just thoughts in those questions. And again, it wasn't any fault of, again, just missing this opportunity, but also wanted to make sure I gave you all accurate information. The WASB have a lot of different tools that we can actually use. And one of the things that they have is this opportunity here, where they have really nailed down some ideas of what board members can do and what board members can't do. Now, again, I'm not going to read through each of these bullet points. This presentation I will be able to share with you all. One of the things that I think is very important is that we remember that when we look at the yes side, I know no one wants to do anything wrong when it comes to doing referendums and having referendum conversations, but just wanted to focus on the yes side for just a quick second. Individual board members can, for or against, individual board members can speak for or against referendums. Board members do not have to lose their First Amendment rights by being board members. And so that was a question that I thought I heard last year. Like, can we talk about, yes, I am for this board, for this referendum? Yes, you can. Board members can participate on committees that advocate for or against a referendum. However, they need to be aware of open meetings law implications if they participate in a group with other board members. And so naturally, if you have more than 4 people that's a part of a yes committee, right, you would have to be mindful of that, because we will be violating open meetings law, where we need to post that you will be at this meeting, at this yes committee meeting. Now, naturally, we couldn't say that no board work will be being conducted at the time, but we can say you can be on a committee that is supporting the referendum. Naturally, if I jumped over to the no side real quick, a school board member may not expend public funds. We all know that you can't use public funds to, advocate for or against a particular position on a referendum. And you cannot advocate as a representative of a school board. You are advocating as an individual. And that's something that, you have to be mindful of when you are, advocating for and or against a referendum. Now, the WSB has this all on one slide. And so from a board member's perspective, I can go dig and get some more yes information, but I just wanted to give you all just some general high level information that the WSB has already provided. And so this is the board member snapshot. I know it seems like it's a whole lot that I would change and say, but that's pretty much it right there, what you all can and or can't do. I also thought it would be important that I bring to the conversation school staff. Naturally, we all work with staff. We all at some point, are intermingling with staff, but it's good for us to know what they can and can't do as well, because we're maybe with them in certain spaces. And so school staff can, okay, so on the yes side, when district staff are off duty, they can advocate for school referendums. This was a big question last year as well. When can I participate in a referendum conversation? Again, when district staff are off duty, they can advocate for school referendums. Staff members do not surrender their rights as citizens because they are employed by a district. However, at all times, staff will need to exercise careful judgment and should not hesitate to contact their district administrators with questions. And I did field a lot of questions last year, reminding people around what they can and couldn't do. I thought I did a pretty good job making sure that we didn't violate any conversations as it pertains to the referenda. But that is something that I wanted to bring to light from a staff member perspective. During work hours or other times, okay, this is a very important slide there, in which they are paid by the district, employees can provide neutral, factual information and educate the public about the referendum. So if I get a phone call, I'm a public employee, I'm a school district employee, right? And someone asks me about the referendum, I can talk to them about the referendum during school time. I can say, well, hey, here's some information that you need to know as it pertains to the referendum. I do that a lot. I have conversations with a lot of people, a lot of different times, even if it's about a referendum or not, it's a similar conversation. And so you can provide, again, neutral, factual information and educate the public about the referendum. That neutral thought right there sometimes is a little hard, because people think, well, what's neutral if you really want this to be, something that you want to pass, right? I always say it is our job to provide the information, and you let the people provide the thoughts around what's neutral and what's not. And so what I don't get into is trying to necessarily convince you of what I'm saying is correct or true, versus here's the information I'm presenting to you. And then you can, as a person, decide how you want to use that information, decide how you want to, process it and or vote and or move the conversation forward. School staff members, I'm just touch on a no real quick. School district administrators and staff can't work on referendum campaigns during work hours. Thus, no supervisors should assign employees the task on working on the general or distribution of advocacy material. So I can't say, hey, just give you an example. Hey, Mrs. Miller, you work for the district. How about you put together the slide? How would you put together this information we want to share at this next community event during school hours? I can't ask you to do that, right? And so that's something that we have to be very mindful of. This is a very touchy one. You have to be very careful around that, because we are always making information and presenting information, but I can't ask staff members, and district members can't ask staff members to work on campaigns during work hours. No district funds or district resources can be used. That's a general thought as well. And it's something that I want to make sure that, we bring to your attention from a school staff, two high level thoughts. And again, this is WSB content. Continued, these are two no's across the board. You can touch on both of these in either board conversations, working with committees, and or staff conversations in general. Referendum education materials created by a school district need to be neutral. Don't use the word like vote, for, elect, support, cast your ballot, vote against, defeat. You can't use those types of information in our pamphlets or things that we create for our public. Of course, you can't use the school buildings by any advocacy groups for any purpose. It should be coordinated through the standard building permit and facility use processes. Neither a vote yes group nor a vote no group should be given preferential access to buildings. And so just because we have a yes committee that may be formulating here soon, we can't say, okay, so now that you're a yes committee, you can always have our buildings every time you want them. We have to be very, can't show any preferential access and or treatment to either the yes and or the no side of the conversation. And so I wanted to give like a real general quick snapshot around this. And this is what this is. Quick facts. I thought this would be important to have out as well. Something that I put together, when is the election day? Where can I vote? All of these are hyperlinks that you can click on and you can actually go to these places. We will be having a referendum during spring break. And it'll be very important that we ask people if they want to vote, or people can vote early. That's a thing. Residents may vote also before the election day. That's a thing. Having this information in people's hands is also a thing, right? Without the information, people sometimes, tend to, start doing whatever they have going on in that very special day in April. And so we have to just be mindful that it is going to be a lot of our responsibilities to make sure people know this information during this time. Now, again, that's just a real quick overview, real quick snapshot. I also think it's very important that people understand that, again, as a school district, we're here. And as it pertains to other districts, they're where they are. We are here. And so our goal is, again, to make sure people understand what that actually means. There is a need in our school district. And there is a need in our school district. And there's no, you can argue about what it is, but there is a need in our school district. And it is our goal to make sure that we have this information, presented to the public across the board. And so you may have thought you was going to get much more than this, but that was just my time. I wanted to share about 6 to 7 minutes of information. And then, of course, I wanted to give you all the space to ask me questions that I might be able to answer at this current time. But really, this is the board member slide. I could probably add a couple of more yeses to this. But as we kind of go from a governance council conversation, I wanted you all to understand that unlike last year, your role in this is very important as board members. Your role in this, and I'm not saying unlike last year, in any referendum conversation, your role in this is very important. And whether you feel comfortable speaking about this information, it is my responsibility to make sure you have the information to speak about, and or I could be alongside of you as you are having these conversations with the constituents that voted you in as board members. And so we need people to come out to the polls. We also need you to be able to speak about the referendum, because again, you have that right. Now, as a public official, and of course, as a school superintendent, I walk a very tight line in these conversations. And yes, I try to do a very good job at presenting this information to the public. And most of you have been to my presentations. I have to remain very neutral. But guess what? You don't. You as board members can say, yes, I support this referendum, and here's why. You can say those things just at the right time, and of course in the right space. So that's my presentation. I just wanted to make sure I shared this information with you all for tonight's conversation. I will take questions. Board President Levy?
Yep, I see Megan Miller with a hand first.
I just want to thank you, Dr. Garrison. I think this is perfect. I think it's the right amount of information. And I'm just wondering, in the spirit of transparency, if we could please post this presentation, or, or however else, if you want it visually a different way or whatever, online, along with all the other referendum materials, in case the public may have questions or concerns. I think it's best to just get the rules out there so everybody kind of sees what they are.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you. This was excellent.
Any other board members? Questions or comment for Dr. Garrison and the presentation of what we can and cannot do about the referendum? So
Let's start with.
well, I guess, no.
I'm so
Well,
sorry.
I have one question. One question I have. So, how do we handle collective action about the referendum that we might take as individuals? That sounds crazy, collective and individuals. I don't know. I'm just other clarifications of. I see as a representative of the school board, when advocating for or against a referendum, it's important for board members to state that they're acting as individuals and they don't represent the school board. So I'm not doing this as Sean Levy, a school board member, president of the Board of Education. I'm doing this as a citizen, would be the statement. Okay.
That's correct.
But in the other space, I think there was one where you said that if 4 board members are present, that there needed to be a posting. So I just had questions about that, like that. I think it was on one of the other slides about that there might be a need for a posting that board members may be present in a quorum.
Sure. So the second bullet point here states on committees that advocate for or against a referendum. However, they need to be aware of open meetings law implications. And so for me, that pretty much means that if 4 of you all are on a, let's say, yes committee, and you are on this committee, you're working, you know, we have to be mindful that this is, you all are still public officials, and one could argue that a quorum is being developed, or that's it, that is a quorum, right? Because 4 or more you are available or are at this meeting. And so that will require, if you ask me, a posting, letting people know that you are here at this space, just to be on the safe side.
Right. We wouldn't be voting and doing any business of the board, but that 4 of them, just like if we all went to
The movies.
Gotcha. Yep. Got it.
One
Okay.
golf. Yep. No business is being conducted, but you are all at in this space. Correct. There's
All
also
right.
videos at the end of this presentation. I think if I clicked too far, it's going to start playing some of the videos. And I don't want that to happen. Okay, good. It didn't happen. So
Take a 3-minute video.
there are videos.
Let's start with a story about your neighbors in Wisconsin communities. Charlotte really wants to work in manufacturing.
Yeah, I didn't want to go into the videos for time sake, but they're good videos, and they're two minute videos. And I would advise every board member to take some time and just listen to those videos. They're not long. It's something that you know, real quick bits. It's videos that can be found on the DPI website. I think we need to, you know, it is my job to help educate the board around things of this nature. And so if you get some time, well, not if you get some time, I'm asking you all to, you know, take the 8 minutes, maybe 9 minutes to review those 4. And it just kind of gives you some thoughts around referendum information that we all need to have as we walk into these conversations. Believe it or not, we are already, and we're underway. We are going. We're putting together our calendar over this past week, and it's extensive, right? And so we just really want people to know that you all mean a lot in this conversation, and we need your, you know, advocacy. And I know you all have it. I just want to make sure I put it out there again with the Governance Council. Thank you.
All right. So I don't see anybody else with any questions or comments for that. So we're now on to 4A, future meeting date. And I gotta get to the right agenda in board docs. Our next meeting date is Tuesday, February 27th at 6 p.m. And now we're on the 4B. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Been moved by board member Brian Anderson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by board member Megan Miller. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. The motion is unanimous and it passes. All right, good night.
Good night, everybody.
Everybody, good
Thank
night.
you all. Have a good night.
Thanks.
All right.